Welcome, dear listeners, to Fictional True Stories, the channel where imagination meets the unknown. I am your host, Grim Echo, the disembodied voice from beyond the grave. Tonight I bring you a collection of spine-chilling tales, woven from the cobwebs of the supernatural and the shadows of the unknown. They are whispered echoes from the other side, lingering between the realms of fiction and reality.
In the silence of the night, a group of adventurers ventures into a haunted asylum, seeking answers. But as they tread the echoing halls, they awaken something malevolent. Will they survive the night? Brace yourselves for the shock that ensues.
In the dead of night, under the pale glow of the moon, I found myself standing at the entrance of the old abandoned asylum. It was a place whispered about in hushed tones, a place where the tortured souls of the past were said to linger. I had heard tales of ghostly apparitions and eerie sounds that echoed through its decaying halls. But I was a skeptic, always in search of a good thrill. I convinced two of my friends, Amina and Karim, to join me on this macabre adventure. Armed with flashlights and fueled by a sense of bravado, we ventured inside. The air inside was cold and damp, and the silence was oppressive. We moved cautiously, the beams of our flashlights cutting through the darkness like knives. As we explored the asylum's twisted corridors, we came across faded paintings on the walls. They depicted scenes of unimaginable horror. Patients in straitjackets, doctors performing grotesque experiments, and faces contorted in agony. It sent shivers down our spines, but we pressed on. We soon reached the basement, a place where the darkness seemed to consume our very souls. The air grew colder and our breaths hung in the frigid air. That's when we heard it. The faint, haunting sound of a child's laughter echoing through the corridors. It sent chills down our spines, for we knew that we were alone in this forsaken place. Determined to find the source of the laughter, we followed the sound deeper into the basement. It led us to a small, dimly lit room at the end of the hallway. As we cautiously pushed open the creaking door, our flashlights illuminated a scene that froze us in our tracks. In the corner of the room, a child no older than 10 stood, dressed in tattered clothing. Her pale face was smeared with dirt, and her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. She continued to giggle, her laughter echoing through the room. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice trembling. The girl's laughter stopped and she fixed her gaze on me. "I'm Layla," she said, her voice sweet and innocent. "I've been waiting for someone to play with me for a very long time." As fear gripped us, we noticed something else. The walls of the room were covered in drawings, crude, childlike sketches of stick figures, all with distorted, contorted features. It was as if the very walls had absorbed the anguish of those who had suffered here. Suddenly, Layla's face twisted into a grotesque grin, and she lunged towards us. Kareem and Amina screamed, and we scrambled to get away. We raced through the basement, our hearts pounding, and burst out into the night. Breathing heavily, we looked back at the asylum, but there was no sign of Layla. We had escaped her clutches, but the horror of that night would haunt us forever. Weeks later, we decided to research the asylum's history, hoping to find answers about Layla. What we discovered sent a chill down our spines. The asylum had never housed a child named Layla. The drawings on the walls, however, were eerily reminiscent of the distorted faces of the patients who had suffered there. And then, the most horrifying realization dawned upon us. We had not encountered a ghost of a child, but the manifestation of the asylum's tortured souls, seeking release from their eternal suffering. As I write this, I can't help but wonder if Layla and her laughter were merely a creation of our own fear, or if the asylum had played a cruel trick on our sanity. One thing is for certain, never again will I venture into the darkness in search of a thrill, for the true horrors are the ones that lurk within ourselves.
In our second tale, a forgotten attic harbored an ancient secret, a tattered porcelain doll with a history veiled in darkness. Its presence, though seemingly inert, exuded an unsettling aura.
I never expected that the antique doll I found at that dusty old estate sale would become the source of my nightmares. It was a porcelain beauty with sapphire eyes that seemed to follow me wherever I went. From the moment I brought it home, strange things started happening. At first, it was subtle. I'd hear faint giggles emanating from the doll's display cabinet late at night. I chalked it up to my imagination. But then, the giggles turned into whispers that seemed to come from within the doll itself. One evening, as I was sitting alone in my dimly lit living room, I noticed the doll had moved. It was no longer inside the cabinet, but sitting on the coffee table, facing me. My heart pounded as I approached it cautiously. Its eyes seemed to glimmer with malevolence, and it wore an eerie grin. Over the next few weeks, my life spiraled into a nightmarish existence. Objects would fly across the room without warning, and I'd often wake up to find the doll perched on my bedside table, staring at me with its lifeless eyes. It became increasingly clear that the doll was possessed by something sinister. I decided to seek help from a paranormal investigator. She arrived with her equipment and immediately sensed the malevolent energy emanating from the doll. She performed a ritual to communicate with the spirit trapped within. The room grew icy cold as the doll's voice echoed through the air, filled with anguish and rage. The spirit revealed its tragic story. A girl who had once owned the doll, driven to madness by its torment. She had died in that very house, consumed by the doll's evil presence. The investigator, with great effort, managed to bind the spirit back into the doll and sealed it within a protective barrier. Since that day, the doll has remained in its cabinet, silent and still. But I can still feel its presence, lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to break free. And every now and then, when I pass by, I swear I see a flicker of those sapphire eyes, a reminder that some nightmares never truly end.
The third tale sees the twist in the story of the final survivor. In the tradition of slasher movies, this tale offers a unique rendition of the story that will be haunting you for life.
Sarah's heart pounded as she cowered in the dimly lit cabin, her breath shallow and ragged. She had seen it all before, the terror, the chaos, the blood-soaked nightmares. But this time she was determined to be the one who survived. Her name was Sarah, and she was the final girl. One by one, her friends had met gruesome fates. She had watched them fall, their screams echoing in the night. She had been chased through the twisted maze of woods, stalked in the inky darkness, and narrowly escaped death's clutches on countless occasions. Yet she had always found a way out. Now she was the only one left. The masked killer closed in, his footsteps heavy on the creaking floorboards, his blade gleaming menacingly in the low light. Sarah closed her eyes, ready to meet her inevitable fate, her mind racing with thoughts of her friends who had perished. But then, a guttural scream pierced the air. Sarah's eyes snapped open just in time to witness the killer crumpling to the ground, lifeless. A knife was lodged deep in his chest, darkening his once white mask with a crimson stain. Sarah stood over the fallen killer, bewildered. Who had saved her? The cabin was empty, and the silence hung heavy in the air. Then a soft voice whispered from behind her. "I'm here," the voice said. Startled, Sarah turned to see a young woman standing in the doorway. She too wore a mask, its features eerily reminiscent of the one worn by the fallen killer. "Who are you?" Sarah stammered. "I'm you," the masked woman replied. Sarah's confusion deepened. "I don't understand." The masked woman took a step closer, her eyes locked onto Sarah's. "You do," she insisted. "You've been killing your friends all along." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "No," she protested. "I didn't." The masked woman shook her head, her mask hiding any trace of emotion. "Yes, you did," she declared. "You're a split personality. You've been blacking out and killing your friends, but you've been blaming it on a masked killer." Sarah staggered backward, her mind whirling in confusion. "No," she repeated. "It's not true." The masked woman's tone grew colder, more determined. "Yes, it is," she said. "And now it's time to face the truth." With chilling resolve, the masked woman raised her knife, and the cabin seemed to close in around Sarah. She closed her eyes and screamed. a haunting symphony of terror echoing through the darkness. As her scream faded into silence, a cold realization crept over her. The masked woman was right, and the truth was far more terrifying than any masked killer. The killer was not an external threat, but a darkness that resided within her, a split personality that had been the true source of the horrors that had unfolded. Sarah had become her own worst nightmare, and now she was forced to confront the evil that lurked deep within her mind.
If you relished these spine-tingling tales, subscribe to our channel for more nightmares in the dark. Hit the like button if these stories kept you at the edge of your seat. Join us in exploring the depths of fear. Subscribe, like, and let the horror continue. Thank you for being part of our chilling community.